Hey everybody, I wanted to make for a while this video about how to do textures, and I wasn't quite sure how to do it or how to approach it. And because people occasionally they'll ask about textures or where I got the textures or how I did it or whatever, and the answer is always the same. It's basically it's the same recently, uh, and it's really Substance 3D assets. That's kind of what I've been using lately. So that's what I say, and I just kind of leave it at that. And but I really kind of want to show how that workflow works because I think it's really cool. It's a little fussy. There's an add-on that Adobe is creating. It's still in development. It's a little quirky. It's got some bugs. So it can be a little difficult to work with, but it's still worth it. I think it really is fast. It's convenient. It's a workflow that's working for me right now. So I just kind of want to share how that works. There's other videos about how this add-on works, but it's more like this is how you do it. And I just wanted to show how I used it in a real world model. So I thought maybe I would just use this piece of kind of like a grungy, kind of a grimy factory sort of scene that I did that uses three different substance textures. And I thought this would be a good model to kind of demonstrate how that works. And we'll look at three basic, well, I don't know if it's basic, but three areas of this model that use Substance 3D assets. So one is the roof, this corrugated metal texture. And then the other two are basically like bricks. So the whole main structure is made up of this brick texture, and then also, and this kind of goes down into this pit too. You can kind of see the bricks go down there too. So we'll look at how that was done, and then the last texture is basically the surrounding surface, kind of like street level, I guess you could call it, kind of this stone type looking thing. That's the last one that I used for this. So there's three here, and just want to point out that let me just zoom in here a little bit. So there's all kinds of piping and ductwork and like containers, and there's the big chamber and a lot of different stuff happening here. These are not substance. There's no substance assets here. They're still procedural, but it uses a whole different workflow that I could make a different video about if you guys want me to, or if there's interest in that, I can do that. It uses a different add-on, different whole workflow. Doesn't require UV unwrapping or anything like that. But anyway, just wanted to point out that I'm not going to be focusing on any of this stuff here, any of the piping, any of this metal stuff, these catwalks, all that stuff. I'm going to leave all that out. I'm just going to focus on the main structure, the roof, and the surface here. So that's what we'll be doing. And yeah, so I just want to also, before we get started, just kind of go through how you get this add-on, a little bit of housekeeping on kind of getting things set up, and we can go from there. So yeah, let's get going. So the first thing that we'll need to do is head on over to Adobe, and there is a pre-release of this add-on. It's not really, like I mentioned before, it's not official. It's still kind of having some kinks worked out. There's a Discord channel that the developers hang out in. They're pretty responsive, but anyway, it's definitely not it's not a 1.0 release. And I'll put this URL in the description so you can get it. So there's two files that we'll need. One is the add-on itself, and then there's this thing called Substance 3D integration tools, which apparently help things talk to one another on the back end. So let's get both of these. So I think I'm on Windows, unfortunately. So we'll get that. And then we will get the plugin itself down there. So let's head on over back to Blender and then open up our preferences, go to add-ons right there. And then just like any other add-on, we'll install this. So we'll go to downloads, and the first one we'll add into add-ons is the Substance 3D Blender add-on itself. So we'll install that one, and then we'll tick it on to enable it. And then you'll notice right away that it wants you to download this other thing, this other kind of piece to it, which we already did. So we can install from disk and then go pick that file as well. And we'll hit install tools. And I think we're ready to go, except for one extra little piece of setup. And this is actually pretty important. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't run. I've learned this the hard way, so I'll save you some time. What we want to do initially is set up our folder structure so things can be a little bit organized for ourselves, but also this add-on needs a folder defined where it can write some data to, because it's going to be writing data as you add textures to your scene. So we can do that. Where did I put this file? So let's see, original content. Yeah, let's see, substance texturing. I think this is where, yeah, so this is the file that I'm going to be working on in this video. And what I want to do is add a folder and just call it textures. And this is kind of in my real workflow, there's a bunch of different folders that hold different things, and I try and repeat that pattern over and over. But just for this, just to demonstrate how this is going to work, I'll just have one folder called textures, and that's going to hold all this Substance 3D data. So that's set up, and then back over in the add-on, we want to define that as a relative data path. So you could use like relative, notation and define it that way, or just click the folder and then pick that folder that we just set up, and then hit select folder, set data folder, and there it is. So it's /textures, which is relative to the blend file that we are working in. And I think that is all we need to do for setup. So let's close this. And yeah, so this is the model that I want to use to kind of demonstrate how this works. And I cleaned every, if we go back to what I just showed you, this is like the final thing that I created a while ago, but I made a new one. Let's go to material preview. I cleaned all the textures out. So, and it's just, everything's got this basic plain principled BSDF material, which is kind of a black thing. And I have an emission shader here. So those are the only shaders in the file right now. So we just go to rendered view, we can kind of see a basic, just kind of the basic scene, just so we have something kind of clean to start with. And we can see right here, there's a new Substance 3D tab that shows up in the viewport here. And this should also be in our shading workspace as well. So this is this whole new panel. This is what we're going to be using to configure all the new textures. So, but we need textures to work with, right? So we need to go get some of those. And the good news is that there are some free textures that you can get. And I'll show you where those are at. And if you just go to, again, I'll put these URLs in the description, but so Adobe, so let's see, regardless of your feelings about Adobe and their subscription business model, just set that aside. Let's just focus on how this works. And I'll just disclose right now, like, I have a subscription. It's the cheapest one. I think it's like $20 a month right now, and you get several things. One of those is access to a ton of different assets, which I use frequently. It's worth it to me. It's not for everybody, I understand that. But there are a bunch of free ones that you can experiment with, and that's what these are. So these are all free for anyone to use, and you can see that they are all available to download. So if you want to create a model and just kind of tinker with this add-on and just see how these procedural textures work, this is the place to go to get that. And before we actually kind of bring these things into the blend file, let's just take a look quickly. I mean, any one of these works. Maybe, I don't know. This lava one is kind of fun. So when you, oh, by the way, let me go back a step. When you when you're looking at free assets, make sure you're looking at the SBSAR format and the procedural technique. So make sure that these are selected and these filters. I think these are parameters in the URL, so it should just go right to it, but just make sure that those are the two that are selected, because that's the ones that we're going to be working with. So let's go back to this lava one here, and you can see there's some presets, and this can give you an idea of just kind of how powerful these are. And there's also a web player, and this gives you the UI to all the different parameters that this material exposes for you to tinker with. So let me just go to full screen. And here are all the different things that you can do. So let's just play with some of these. Chunk density, what does that do? Low, okay, interesting. Heat, let's bring the heat way down. Let's see what that does. Interesting, okay, lava color, let's make it blue. That's not really very lava-y, but might get some interesting effects. So you can kind of see all the different things that you can crack density a lot. Some, none, okay. Some, none. So anyway, you get the idea of just how kind of handy this can be. And one thing I like to play with right away is the random seed and just generate one, just kind of see the different looks that this can take. And let's see what that does. Doesn't do a whole lot, does it? Oh, there we go. That worked. Okay. So you can kind of see it randomizes just the whole feel of the texture, which is fun to kind of play with. So anyway, that kind of gives you a sense of what these procedural materials are capable of. And all this stuff is going to be available in the Blender add-on, which we'll see in a second. So let's head on back to Blender and let's start doing some stuff. So how should I start? I think what we'll do first, let's maybe work on the roof first, shall we? Why don't we do that? So the first step in this process is basically, let's see if I can lay this out for you. So all these procedural textures are going to need a UV unwrapped mesh. So at a minimum. So you need to do that. And because it uses the UV texture coordinates to kind of figure out where it should be applied to the mesh. So in that sense, it works just like any other texture that you might get from like Texture Haven or Polygon or something like that. So it's the same kind of, it's the same requirement in that sense. But it gets a lot more interesting after that, right? So that's the first step. And the second step is to load the texture in, the SBSAR file that you get from Adobe. And then the third step is to kind of tweak things and organize the different parameters to suit whatever kind of creative, artistic outcome that you want. So let's first start with unwrapping. And this is a very simple mesh. So this would be pretty easy, and again, we're going to try and create this part here, this corrugated thing. So let's go back to our layout and let me go into, let's go into the UV edit space. So I'll just tab in to edit that, select all. And for this one, since this is such a simple rectangular shape, there's no complexity here. I'm just going to hit U, and I'm going to use the Smart UV Project option in UV mapping. We can't get away with that with more complex shapes, but for this one, since it's so basic, I'm just going to use that one just so we can get something pretty quickly. And so that is that's our UV map for this mesh, and you can see that there's now a UV map under the UV maps index list. And yeah, so let's go to shading now. And with this, I'm going to stay in material preview mode for this. And so the next step is to bring our asset into the add-on itself. So to do that, we just hit load, and then we're just going to pick the SBSCR file that we acquired from Adobe. So I have, I just kind of have all my assets that I have downloaded over the last couple months kind of collected in this shortcut. So I think the one that I want for this roof is It's corrugated something. Corrugated, there it was. Corrugated, heavy, rusty corrugated panels. So that's what I want to bring in. Hit load substance material. And this whole panel populates with all the same options that we saw in the web UI on Adobe Substance website. So this is all where this is all available for us to tweak to our liking. And just kind of a couple things I want to point out here on this one is it just, what I just did was load in the material into memory. It hasn't done anything with it yet. I haven't applied anything. So that's why we're not seeing any change. So what we need to do, and you can set this preference in the add-on, but I kind of like to keep this under my control and apply it when I want. So to do that, just hit apply. And it's going to throw it on there, and probably not a great, not a perfect alignment or orientation or scale that you would want. So this is kind of way too zoomed in. It's kind of grainy, and we can pretty quickly change some of those things. The first thing I like to do is just up the resolution a little bit. And there's a bunch of different options here. It goes all the way up to like 4K, but just while I'm kind of organizing the texture and getting it aligned correctly and getting it scaled correctly, I just like to work in 256 because it's enough to kind of, I can see the detail, but not so big that it's kind of bogging things down. So I changed that to 256, and right away I can kind of see that it's too the scale's all wrong, and there's two ways to address that. I'll show you both, actually. Let me just show you the way that I used to do it all the time, and I don't do this anymore, but I'm going to show you this anyway. First way is, since it's already using the UV texture coordinate and it's routing that through the mapping node, I can change our scale. So I can change this and kind of adjust the scale to get things correct. But instead of trying to kind of change all these values by hand, I just like to add a value node. So this can easily feed a float into the scale vector. So now I can, let's bring this back to 1. So now I can kind of adjust this whole slider and get things scaled kind of the way I want. So that looks possibly good, but the first thing I don't really like, just to go back to the reference image, you can see that it doesn't have a lot of rust spots on it. I don't like a lot of rusty distractions because it just makes the whole composition look a little bit too busy. It's already kind of gritty enough. I don't need all that rust. So what I want to do is get rid of some of that. And oops, let's go back to shading. And that should be available as a parameter to me in the add-on parameters. So where is that? If I go to, let's see, it should be like a rust amount or something like that. Rust amount 0.52. Let's make that 0.2 maybe. So you can see now there's a lot less rust, but the base color, let's go into cycles. Yeah, the base color doesn't look, I mean, that's white. It doesn't look good at all. So let's maybe bring that down to something like, I don't know, something like that, maybe. Looks a lot better. It's kind of closer to what I eventually want. Let's go back to the reference. I mean, it's kind of like a black, dark gray, I guess. Good enough. We can adjust it later. Can always adjust everything later. That's kind of the beauty of this whole procedural texture add-on from Adobe. So, and there's a bunch of stuff. There's let's go back to material preview. Things just seem to like respond a little bit better to the parameters if you're in material preview versus well, I have my rendered set to cycles, and things just aren't quite as snappy. So to kind of, while I get everything situated, I like to be in Eevee. So that's what material preview is set to. And let's just play with some of these things. So let's see, grime amount. That's pretty high right now. Let's just zero it out and see what happens. So, okay, so I definitely want some grime, but maybe not as much as there was. So grime amount, maybe 0.1, or maybe let's just slide it up a little bit. By the way, when this is behaving really nicely right now, so I can see that the texture is responding pretty fast as I change this, but sometimes this just kind of doesn't, you're not getting any visual feedback and you're changing parameters. So like, what the hell is going on? Sometimes the plugin just kind of, it just fails and stops working. At the end, I'll talk about ways to avoid that if I remember. But right now, if it ever does that, an easy way to kind of get it to pick up the change is just to switch the viewport mode to something like solid, and then just switch it right back to material preview or whatever you were looking at it in, and it should pick up the change. So that's just one little trick if you ever run into that. What else do we have? We have panel pattern X, panel pattern Y. Let's see what that is. So, okay, so that's how many patterns there are in each of these directions. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Rust color, those seem good. Paint roughness. I do want this not as rough as it was. So this is kind of starting to look good, but it's still a little bit, the scale just doesn't feel right to me. That's way too tight. So let's go to something like, I don't know, something like that, and maybe up the pattern. Something like this. And we can also adjust the location of the mapping. So that might be okay. Maybe the scale is just a little bit, maybe something like this. Anyway, you can kind of tweak this to your liking, but let's pretend that we're happy with that. And then now's a good time. I can just maybe up the res a little bit and just see this take a little bit better shape. So that seems good to me. And since I want the other roof to take the same, pretty much the same texture, I can, just like any other material, I can apply that directly to it. So I'm just gonna pick this, and remember though, we have to UV unwrap this guy. So I'm gonna, in edit mode, I'm gonna hit A, select everything, hit U, and again, since this is such a simple mesh, I'm just gonna hit Smart UV Project, and it should just give me a good result. So there we go, I have a UV map now. And then back in shading, I'm just gonna go ahead and pick from the material list, the material that the plugin, or the add-on rather, generated for me, which is this heavy rusty corrugated panels. And I can see that this is not quite, there's a couple of problems with this. Let's look from the top. I can see that since this is a bigger mesh, the scale doesn't really work with this one. It's not quite right. And if I change the scale value, since it's sharing the same material data, it's being applied to both, right? I don't really want that. It looks good for this one, but for this one, it's way too scaled in. So this is why this value is, it's good if you're only going to apply this texture to one object, then you can go ahead and use something like this. But if you're going to reuse this texture to something else, the value is, it's unlikely to work. So unless the mesh happens to be a similar size. So how do we fix that? And this is where the other method comes into play, which is the one I prefer just because it works every time and have a little bit more control over it, which is to edit the UV map itself and scale it to get the result that I want. So let's look from the top again. And so let's okay, we already have the UV map fully selected. So I'm just gonna hit S and scale this up. And because I'm scaling it up here, the texture is distributed over a bigger area, or smaller area, I should say. So it'll look tighter and it should have the opposite effect when I actually look at it over here, right? So if I'm zooming in, things are getting more dense, like the texture is being distributed over a smaller area. So let's maybe something like that, maybe. That looks, let's look in cycles. That looks about right. Things are a little bit, they still look a little bit a little bit tight to me. So let's go back to shading, and let's pick the original roof that we had, and I just want to change the scale. Let's just change this to 1. I mean, just hell with it. So that's 1, and now I should, because I corrected the UV scale on this, now I should be able to use the scale, and things should be relatively similar between the two of them. Let's look in cycles. It's still really not what I have. I have something more like this in mind. A little bit spread a little bit further apart. So I think that looks about right. Let's maybe adjust this map a little bit. It's UV map, and kind of just nudge things around. Get the rust spots in a pleasing area. Okay, I think that looks good enough. This looks a little crooked, doesn't it? Maybe is that in the texture? Yeah, this isn't quite square, so I guess that's in the texture itself. Okay, no problem. Thought that was maybe my UV map was distorted or something, but looks pretty good. Okay, so that's the roof. And let's do the building, the main structure of the factory building next. So this is our brick texture. So again, we're going to go back to UV editing. Just going to go to material preview, and actually let me go to solid. I'm going to isolate this. I'm going to hit slash on the numpad to isolate this part of the model. And I'm going to hit A, or hit tab rather, to go into edit mode, hit A to select everything, all the vertices and faces. And when I hit U, this is where I was talking about Smart UV Project is kind of like, it's a lazy way to do this, and it gives you a quick result. But if you really want things to wrap nicely and have, the seams not be where you want them to be, or things to wrap nicely, this probably isn't going to work, but let's do it and see what we get. So we'll do Smart UV Project. Let's keep the island margin to 0 because I want the edges to be flush with one another, and I'll hit OK. And this might be okay, but I can see how, so let me back up a second. So I want this, where's my annotation tool? I'm in edit mode, that's why, right? Yeah, so I want basically this edge, I want this to be seamless. I want the bricks to kind of wrap around nicely, and I don't want to see any kind of rough seam here. I don't really care about these edges because I'm not going to see those, right? They're behind the roof, so I don't really care about that. Don't much care about the seam over here or the ones in the back. Pretty much the only one that I really care about I'm going to see. Oh, maybe this one too, right? We're going to see that. So I want the bricks to wrap around there. But that's basically it. So when I go back to this, when I go back to isolate this mesh and draw some seams, actually let me just get rid of any seams that might have been set, and let's draw some seams here. So I'm going to go into edge mode, and again, this is the seam that I mentioned. Basically, these two are the ones that I need to be undisturbed, or need the bricks to wrap around nicely. So I'm going to basically pick the other ones here. This guy, all these, that one, these two. Okay, I'm just going to hit U and then mark seam. Let's see, and I'm going to need that one as well, mark seam, because this face is going to, I need that one as well, U, mark seam. Okay, so this is going to kind of unfold itself, and it's going to hinge, like these two faces are going to hinge up So this is going to kind of go up, and this is going to go like this, and so we'll end up having like a shape that looks kind of, well, I don't know how exactly it's going to look when you flatten it out, but anyway, this should work for us if I drew enough seams. Let's find out. I'm going to hit A again, U, except this time I'm going to hit unwrap, not smart UV project. And it looks pretty good, I think. So this face, yeah, so I can see that these faces are nicely flush with one another. And that should be all I need for this. So let's go back to shading and let's bring in our new texture. So you remember how to do this, right? Load, pick the texture, and the one for this is going to be Bricks Camden Blend. That is that's the one that I used for the bricks. So I'm going to hit load substance material. It's going to add it to the list here, and then I need to apply it. So I'm going to right away hit apply, and you can see again it does apply it, but the scaling's all bad and terrible. So instead of manipulating the mapping node here, like I showed you with the corrugated roof, I'm just going to go right into the UV editor and scale it up that way. So let's go back into material preview so I know what we're doing. And I'm just going to hit S and scale all of these faces in the UV map up. And you can also see that the bricks are oriented incorrectly. So I'm just going to rotate this entire thing by 90 degrees. So I'm just going to hit R and then hit Control so it snaps every 15 degrees or whatever, and just rotate that 90 degrees like this. Doesn't really matter which way I go, counterclockwise or clockwise. And that's definitely more what I'm after. So let's hit slash to get out of isolation. And I can see that we're almost there. So I'm going to tab back in, hit A for all, and then I'm going to scale this up even a little bit more because I want these bricks a little bit smaller over here. So I'm going to scale this up further yet. Something maybe something like this. I don't want them too small because I don't want it to look so real that it doesn't feel interesting to look at anymore. I want them a little bit cartoony sized, but not super crazy. Just something like that. Let's check with our original image. Yeah, it's about what I had before. So that looks pretty good. And now in the parameters for this new material, you can do all kinds of things. So let's bring the res up to maybe 512. Okay, so maybe I don't like these dark bricks, for example. I like them, but maybe you don't. So there's a way to change that. So bricks color 04 is the one to change. So maybe I want to bring the value up a little bit so it's not so dark. So there we go. So they lightened up a little bit. Maybe I'm happy with that. Let's see, maybe let's see, dirtiness. Yeah, they're pretty clean, right? And this is kind of a grimy, gritty factory or foundry or something. So they should be dirtier. So dirtiness I see is 0. So let's see what a 0.5 dirtiness is. It's dirty. Maybe not enough. Maybe 1. Maybe a little too dirty. So I don't know. Maybe something around there. Looks good. I always like to check rendered view just to kind of see how things are shaping up. So things are looking pretty good. I'm missing a lot of lights. So the texture and the color and the shading and all that stuff isn't quite, you can kind of see it's not quite what we have in the original image that I showed you. But it's actually, let me just take this emission. I had this object, this plane down here emitting this light from this like pit in the middle of the scene. I'm just gonna maybe make this a lot more intense, maybe like 70 or 80 or something. So yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. Maybe it's a little bit too orange. Oh, whatever. Okay. So we have that part of the building, and one note about these materials from Substance 3D, they always drop in a displacement node and it's set to scale 0. Displacement, it might be cool with the corrugated roof because these things have kind of like a wavy texture, and you can see if you zoom in, it's just flat. These really should be doing kind of like this kind of thing. But I mean, you'd have to subdivide this mesh quite a bit and then enable displacement and bump. And there's a couple steps to do that. I'm not going to do that in this. Well, what the hell, right? Let's do it. So I didn't do it in the original model. You can kind of see I got a little lazy and it's just completely flat. But let's do something new. Let's try it. Let's, this might be a horrible idea, but YOLO. Okay. All right, so let's take this mesh. Let's do this. Let's go over here and do this here. So what do we got here? So we have solidify a bevel. All right, we should be able to get away without applying the solidify modifier. So let's first of all, let's get squares. Let's put some edge loops in there. And then maybe we will add 2 levels of subdivision. So I'm just going to hit Control 2 to hit that. So we can see now we have a subdiv modifier in the stack here. So if we go to wireframe mode, if I take off optimal display, I should see the density of this thing. So that's pretty, I mean, it's not super dense. Maybe we want 3. Yeah, let's try that. Let's see. I mean, I don't know. This should work. So let's see how it works. So let's go back into shading. And now, so this displacement node is already set up for us. But in order for that to really work, we need to go into our material settings, and then down here in the settings group, we need to change this displacement from bump only to displacement and bump. And you can see it still didn't do anything. This is still straight. It should be kind of wavy. And that is because, let me select this again. That is because Substance probably, I mean, I think it's a courtesy, right? They don't just assume you want displacement. So they set the scale to 0. So let's just maybe bring this up slightly to 0.2. Is this doing anything? What's going on here? Oh, we need to be, of course, in cycles for this to work. Yeah. So, okay. So that's kind of more interesting, right? Does that look about right? Maybe 0.3? Or is that getting to be it's a little too much, isn't it? Maybe 0.15. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's how you do that. I won't do it for the other one, but that's basically the steps there. So you need to enable displacement and bump in your material settings down here, and then subdivide the thing that you're trying to displace, and then make sure that the displacement scale is non-zero. That's basically the 3 things I need to do there. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing. A little sidetracked. So let's go unwrap this other remaining piece of the big building. So that's this part here. Let me just hit slash again. So I'm looking at just that. And actually, let me not do that and look at what I need to do as far as seams. So this is pretty obscured by like a vertical beam, so I don't need to worry about that. This is a corner I can't see around. All this stuff here is hidden by the surface mesh here, so that's not a concern. Really, it's just this edge that I need to make sure is doesn't have a seam. So let's go hit slash again, tab in, and I'm going to clear any seams that I have previously set, so we have something clean to work with. So now I should be able to just go back into edge mode and select these edges. that one. Hit U, mark seam, and then A, U, unwrap. And that should be all I need to do. Okay, so let's go back to shading. And again, we already have our brick texture in our materials list. So I can just apply that. Right now it just has the black default. I can just apply that now directly like any other texture that I would be working with. And you can see again, let's go to material preview. The scale is just way off. So, so yeah, you know the step, right? So we go to UV editing, select the whole UV, go to material preview so I can see what we're doing, and then scale up. And let me just get out of ISO view so I can match the scale roughly to the other building so it doesn't look ridiculous. And something around there. Something like that. And then to make sure that the bricks look like they're kind of like, just to make sure things look like make sense, I'm going to move the UV map just along the Y axis here so I can kind of get the bricks to kind of match up right flush to the ground right here. So it kind of makes sense that they start on the surface and go up. So that looks to me pretty good. And let's maybe up the res on our bricks to 1024. Okay. So that looks pretty decent to me. I could do displacement on these bricks too, and there's displacement maps it comes with, and you can see the displacement node here, but I'm not really going to do that. I'm already happy with the way that the normal map gives me kind of a nice depth of each brick, but I might want to tweak the intensity of that. So we can do that. We should be able to do that in the configuration panel here. So normal intensity and these basic parameters. So this list comes with every single SB, SAR, Adobe 3D, Substance 3D material that you get. They all come with this. The advanced parameters are the ones that the designer of this material has made available for you to kind of tweak. So we can go to normal intensity, and if I just bring that to 0, you should be able to see it now. It looks super flat, right? Yeah, that doesn't look, well, it might look good depending on your artistic intention, but for me, I don't really want that. So I want that to be something, normal intensity, like maybe 0.4. So here again, what I mentioned about the viewport not picking up a change, just go and toggle out and then in again, and it'll pick it up. So that's one little quirk that hopefully the developers will iron out at some point. But I think I like that result. So let's save that. And things are kind of starting to take shape. So the last part that I wanted to show you is the surface, like the street level surface. And by now we should get to know the dance, right? It's load the material, or UV unwrap the object that you want the material to go on, load the material in, and then start tweaking with parameters and get the scaling right and so forth. Those are basically the steps. So let's do that for the final thing here. Okay, so back to UV editing. I'm going to pick this street. Actually, this part here, I want that thing to be unwrapped. So for this one, okay, so for this one, the composition here, the rendered area is just this rectangle, and I'm not going to see any edges of this. So I am going to see these, right? Yeah. So let's just do the lazy way, smart UV project. Let's just do that and see what we have. This might be good enough. Let's try it, right? Okay. So next step, right? Shading and load. And let's go to where we store all our procedural substance textures. And the one, I can't remember the one I used for this. Damn. Which one did I use for this? Hang on, this will just take a second. Bricks, oh, it's bricks basalt combined. I think that's what it is. I'm gonna load that. Well, we'll find out, won't we? All right, so let's apply that one to our selected object. Yep, that was the one. So, and obviously this looks just terrible. So let's bring the res up just slightly. And let's go into material preview so it works a little bit faster. Yeah, so I can see that I need to do some scaling, but I mean, it doesn't look terrible. And really this material is, it's kind of, they're bricks, but for this composition, let me take you back to the end result. For this design, I wanted to make the surface a little bit more interesting than just a flat material. So I did choose a texture for this, but I didn't want to have the bricks on this anywhere near the same scale as the building, because I don't want these to be kind of in conflict with these bricks. So if we have bricks here and like this corrugated stuff here, it's like it's just a lot to take in. It's like a lot to look at. So you want to kind of create a little bit of some of these textures have to kind of drop back and not be the star of the show. And that's what this role is. This is kind of a supporting role. So I scaled them way up so they look more like kind of concrete slabs than bricks. So that gives these bricks a chance to really play the role of bricks, where these are just kind of they give the street surface, like something interesting, but they're not like commanding your attention. They basically fall to the background. So that's kind of what I wanted to have happen there. So when we go back to scaling it, let's go back to UV editing. So when we go to scale this, let's go to material preview so we can see the effect of our scaling. And back over here, I'm going to hit S and scale up, but I'm not going to scale too far. I'm not going to do this because that's too many bricks. It's just crazy. It doesn't look very good. So let's bring this in to something like that, maybe. Let's see what that looks like in rendered mode. It's kind of more what I want, but it's still a little distracting. And also the grout here is a little bit too wide, like the gaps here, this gutter, it's too wide. So let's see if we can do something about that in the parameters for this material. So bricks basalt combined. Okay, that's what we are looking at. Let's do brick spacing, maybe 0.1 and 0.1. That should bring things tightly together. Yep, that's what I want. Let's see if we can darken this up a little bit. Yeah, let's see if we can bring this down. Watercolor, is that what I want? No, that's that's the watercolor. That's not really what. It's not really want to affect that. I want the brick itself to be not as bright. Let's see here. Yeah, we might have to do that with. Might have to manipulate the base color a little bit here directly in the node graph, or work with the ambient light. But let's just try a couple things here first. Let's actually I do want this mortar age to be aged, and that mortar color still looks a little dark to me. Let's bring that up a little bit more. Let's bring that, see, impact damage, mortar age. Let's bring that back down to 0. Okay. So the plugin looks like it's not responding as well as it was. Maybe it's coming back. 12. Sometimes you gotta nudge some of these settings to kind of bring things back to life. This is the part of this plugin that still frustrates me. It kind of, it gets a little fussy after a while. Border brick damage 0.3. Let's see what else. Brick height. There's a height variation that I saw somewhere. Brick depth variation. Let's see what that does. Okay. Let's see, rounded shape. Okay, that did add a little bit of roundness. Mortar, let's see, inner mortar bevel. Okay. All right. Could try to see here. Okay, let's try to bring the luminosity down a little bit. And the normal intent, actually that's pretty good. Let's see, 3. Too dark. So 8.4. Okay, getting there. Ambient occlusion 6.6. It's getting there. It's getting there, and also have a lot of light here. Could be contributing to it as well. You can also see in the reference image, like I faded this out a little bit with texture map with texture painting. I'm not gonna do this in this video, but it's a handy way to kind of like fade out textures and mix them together. But anyway, that's the process, and it's pretty handy. It saves me a lot of time. And if you want, you can make your own textures, and you can use Substance, what is it called? Substance Designer, Substance 3D Designer, man, it's late. To create basically anything you want. I mean, I tinker with this a little bit. It's a little bit over my head at the moment. I have to kind of change my paradigms of thinking to create these. I'd much rather use other people's assets that they've created. There's thousands of them. They're way better than I could do at this point. So so check them out. And here's is this, am I logged in here? Let's see. Too many things going on at once. God. Gotta get this whole thing up this window. Otherwise it won't maximize correctly. There we go. So these are all my assets, and these are basically the same assets that when I hit load, all of these. So instead of me trying to remember what things look like, I usually just go back to my assets in my Substance account, or I guess it's Adobe now. And this just kind of shows me all the things that I use. So here's the Camden blend bricks that I used for the factory structure. I use this all the time. This is very versatile brick texture. Use that for a lot of different models. What else did we use today? We used the basalt combine, so that's this one. That should look familiar. And then the other one we used is the corrugated panels. So that's a handy one too. Yeah, so that's it. If you want, so again, I did not go into any of this metal structure, any of these piping or something like that's a whole different thing. It's really fun to use, and there's a different add-on for that. If you want, I can make a video on how to do that if you guys want. But otherwise, that's the Substance 3D add-on workflow. A few caveats: don't have more than 2 Blender instances open at once. So don't have more than one. Don't have more than one Blender instance going, because it'll the code that manages the relationships between your blend file and the Substance assets that it writes to that textures directory, it gets all screwed up. So, and it just won't, and then it won't work from that point forward. You have to do everything over again. So just don't do that. And so here's the texture. So back when we defined which folder the add-on was going to store all these procedural files in, that's where this goes. So for me, I defined it as textures, if you remember that at the beginning of the video. And here's what the add-on is writing all this data. So all these maps, all these bitmaps are being referenced by, and we can look at this. We can actually go look at this bricks texture. This is a node group. So we can tab into this and we can kind of see all the files that it's referencing and using to control this texture with all the parameters, using all the parameters to influence how it looks. So it's important that these folders don't mess with any of this stuff, or things are going to get really just going to stop working. You have to start over. I've had to do that a bunch of times. The other tip I want to show you is if things just don't, if they just feel like they're not really working correctly and the whole thing just starts to kind of like not respond, go into your task manager if you're using Windows, and make sure that see how there's this task called Substance Remote Engine.exe. Make sure that task is running. If it's not, then the add-on won't do anything. So that's one thing to check to diagnose if things are going wrong. And also, when you quit Blender, this process should stop. If it doesn't stop, you should manually kill it. So that's the other tip I have for you. And then lastly, there's a Discord channel for Adobe, that a Discord group that has a channel rather just for this Blender add-on, and there's folks in there using it, and they have problems like, hey man, this doesn't work, or what's going on. And the developers, there's a couple of them in there, they're pretty responsive. So you can be active in there if you want, and learn kind of how people are using it. And I'll put the link to that as well in the description. So that's it. Hope you guys learned something. Excuse me. Yeah, take it easy. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.